Sega Bits presents Sega Talk, a podcast talking all things Sega, with your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. So what?
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of Sega Talk. I'm your host, George, and with me is Barry.
Your host with the most.
Oh, that's what they say right on the street.
That's a sign that we haven't
terrible.
done. That's a sign we haven't done one of these in a while. When I'm just like, yeah, whoops.
Yeah, this is a very special episode because if you didn't know, on September 9th, 2019, which is the future because we're recording this a few days in the past, the Dreamcast is going to turn 20 years old in America, which is a big date for me and Barry since we grew up as Americans and enjoyed the Dreamcast in America. And like always, if you like if you like these kind of shows and you want to see us do more, you could support us on Patreon at patreon.com/SegaBits.
Yes.
And if you want to subscribe, you could subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcast, and of course, you can see the video form on our YouTube channel. And like every episode, let's talk about our history with the launch of the Dreamcast. I think we've told this story in like Sega News Bits episodes randomly here and there.
Yeah.
But tell us your first time you, I guess, heard about the Dreamcast, saw the Dreamcast, and played the Dreamcast, or even your experience with the hype surrounding the Dreamcast before release.
Yeah, so I honestly, I can't pinpoint when it was. It must have been in some tech magazine, maybe Wired. You know, like I'd hear about something coming, but I mean, it's so hard to put yourself in that mindset of when you were a kid or a teenager in the 90s and how news came to you and how you processed it. Because I'll be completely honest, I didn't really know what the Saturn was when it released, and it took me like 5 years to really figure out that it was a disc-based brand new system, that the little cartridge slot in the back was not a Sega Genesis. Like, I couldn't process it. I didn't know what it was, and maybe that's Sega's marketing failing, like, to tell a normie like me who only owned a Sega Genesis what they were selling. But like when I saw the Dreamcast and when I read about it, and this must have been like 1998 when people in Japan and journalists started importing it, and I was reading about it, like I instantly understood what it was. It was a brand new console. It used discs. It had the internet. And just reading the feature list, like this was a device, this was a console that you wanted to own. And this, and I mean, I guess I'm trying to maybe compare it to something more modern. It's kind of like when the iPhone was shown off. And like you immediately understood what they were going for. You saw all these features and you're like, that sounds really awesome. And that's kind of like how the Dreamcast felt to me, where it was just like, it made perfect sense. Like, it wasn't, like, what's an alternative? The Wii U reveal. That was confusing, right?
Very confusing.
Yeah. Like, we were like, as Wii owners, I think we both had Wiis, we were like, oh, it's an add-on. That's kind of cool. I'll pick this up for, what is it, $100, you know?
Yeah.
And I guess maybe
the thing you said about the Sega Saturn with the cartridge slot, you know, a lot of people that I knew in real life would tell me the same thing. They're like, you could play Sega Genesis on this? And like, they all try to put the Sega Genesis games on it, but no.
Oh, yeah. Even if it said you couldn't, we would all try it. And I think a modern equivalent, and I know people compare the two, I don't think it's a real valid comparison, but the Nintendo Switch, like when I saw that, it wasn't as exciting as the Dreamcast was, but still, like, I saw what they were doing instantly, and I was like, okay, I totally get what you're presenting here. It looks like an awesome way to play video games. And that's what this was. So that was my first time hearing about it. How much further do you want me to go? Or are we going to get into our actual like purchase stories?
Or you could just let us know when you, I guess, first played one?
I probably played like a demo unit at a store before it came out. I know they must have had those because there were Japanese models, but I believe it was Sonic Adventure, probably at like a video or electronics store, and I was just I couldn't play it. Like it was because remember, this is someone going from Sega Genesis to Dreamcast, and even with the Saturn, you were kind of struggling with figuring out the 3D controls. So, yeah, I remember playing it but not doing very well and thinking, well, this is still awesome, and I'm looking forward to like buying the console and playing it outright, which was, and we'll get into that I'm sure in a little bit, but which was like November 2001.
Yeah, you were...
Or 99.
Yeah.
99.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my friend got one. Growing up, he's the first one to get one.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I was at the age where, like, I really got into magazines. I think we talked about this when we had the people from the official Dreamcast magazine on and we did the interview. But the Dreamcast was, like, when I got really obsessed with, like, reading everything about video games, every news, like, what's the next game coming out? Every month I would, like, wait for my official Dreamcast magazine, my EGM, and I'd be, like, obsessed with, like, what's happening in Japan because they had everything ahead of us. And they did some really cool features on Japanese games. But so I didn't really know much about the Sega Dreamcast coming out. So it was weird. Like, I was so ignorant about it. I just played the games that I had in my house. I was like, oh, I love the Sega Saturn. It has this. Oh, I love my PlayStation 1. It has these games. Mm-hmm. And my friend was, like, hyping me up. He's like, oh, they're making another Sega console. And I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. I mean, I was hyped for it, but I'm like, I can't afford that.
Right.
And his parents bought it for him, like, I don't know, it was like the week of launch or like around the launch era. So like when I would go over, and he would be like bragging. Obviously, he's like, come over whenever you want. We can play Power Stone because that's the game he got. Because there was Sonic Adventure was like sold out. He had the demo disc that came with it that had like Ready to Rumble, Sonic Adventure, the first level. All those, oh dude, when I first saw Sonic Adventure, I was like, oh dude, how can a game look better than this? Like, what do we need? Like, it looks ridiculous. Yeah. Like, your footprints in the sand, little things like that. It was just like, blew my mind, right?
Yeah.
And
sure.
full 3D, the first time we saw a good full 3D Sonic, right?
Yeah. So
that all amazed me. It was pretty, and then he started pulling out the, like, you could go on the internet with this. And it's crazy, dude. Like, you know, going from having a Sega Saturn or a Nintendo 64, and then you can play with anybody on anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
that's insane.
It's interesting you bring that up too. Like, it's weird that we can remember looking at those graphics and thinking it can't be topped. It can't. Like, how can you make it better than this? And I remember thinking that too with the Genesis. I was like, there's no way that you can make 2D graphics look better than this. Like, they've done it. There's no way.
Yeah, they've done it, but it's like when you're in that era, you're like, you don't have anything else to compare it to. Like, the only thing you can compare it to is like N64, but like, let's be honest, when we had this PlayStation 1 and the N64 and they were out, we kind of knew in the back of our head that like, this is pretty primitive. Like, I did at least. I mean, it looked great. I love Metal Gear Solid 1, but like, even then I'm like, his eyes look a little weird. It's a little blocky. Yeah,
and I mean, I think I brought up the Genesis thing because that was coming off of, you know, like Atari, NES, Master System. You know, you look at those and you can see the limitations. And when you got to the Genesis, you were like, I don't see the limitations anymore. Like, I don't see how they can improve this. I mean, looking back, I probably could have thought, well, like actual 2D animation. But I was looking at games like Mickey Mania and Earthworm Jim, and I was like, these are cartoons, basically, controllable cartoons. With the Dreamcast, that's when I was like, they've perfected 3D graphics, and I don't think they can go any further than this. And sure, I would see like new games come out and improve graphics, but honestly, like, I never looked at one of those games and thought they looked primitive, even at the time. If the only thing that did were the PlayStation 1 ports and the Nintendo 64 ports to the Dreamcast.
Yeah. Let's get right into development because I literally wrote like 1,000 pages on just the development because, to be honest with you, I'm surprised at how early Sega was already like thinking about the successor to the Saturn because like, let's start. The development of the Dreamcast was largely inspired by the failure of the Sega Saturn, which was swamped by the PlayStation 1, which was largely and arguably superior. I said arguably because I would argue when it came to 3D graphics, while the Sega Saturn was initially created for high-quality 2D graphics. Ironically, Sony was inspired to make a 3D console due to the popularity of Sega's own Virtua Fighter. At this point, Sega had a few options. Knowing that the PlayStation was more powerful in 3D, the CEO at the time, I'm going to butcher this guy's name, Hayao Nakayama?
Sure.
Hakayama had two choices. You could either upgrade the console, like the 32X add-on, or scrap it for a new powerful console, which I think they should have done the later, especially considering these talks started as early as September 1994. So basically, the Saturn was barely out in Japan. So so they were thinking about going with an add-on like the 32X, but did you know that Sega was already thinking of like a successor to the Sega Saturn? Like, I of course you didn't. I mean, we were so young back then, but like 1994, that's pretty freaking like early, don't you think? Like, you barely released your console in one region, and you're already like, it's a failure, guys. We got the sequel.
I guess I could see that being surprising, but at the same time, you got to imagine that even Nintendo is thinking about the next console after the Switch well before the Switch was released. You know?
Yeah.
Like everyone's thinking about these things, but when you hear about it, when you peek behind the curtain, you're like, wow. And we'll actually get into that at the very end of this when I get into how early Sega was actually thinking about their next step after the Dreamcast. Like, it's pretty surprising.
Yeah, and one of the things that like really surprised me about this, like, is that it didn't really surprise me. It's just the idea that like how obsessed Sega at this time was with like power of a console. And if you really think back on all the interviews, if you ever read interviews with developers from Sega on the Sega Saturn when they talk about graphical power, they always bring up that like there's hidden power in the Sega Saturn that nobody could take advantage of because it's hard. And pretty much, I don't know if I would say pretending because I'm not a developer, but a lot of the reason that the PlayStation 1 took off was because how easy it was to develop for. Not because of its power, in my opinion. But, the Saturn sold fairly well in Japan. It was actually Sega's highest selling console in Japan for them, so it did really well. The console didn't do much in other places, including Europe and USA. Sega was already in talks about a Sega Saturn successor as early as 1995. The rumor was that in 94 they were talking about it, but people knew for a fact as early as 1995. With Lockheed Martin, who helped make Sega's popular Model 1 and Model 2 arcade boards at the time, and were working on the Model 3 arcade board at this time, were in charge of what they were calling the Sega Saturn II. Their main focus was graphical power, again, something that Sega was obsessed with back then. Lockheed and Martin was using their Real 3D series chipsets based on Windows PC, and Saturn II rumors were that it was going to use a R3D or /100 chipset for its graphics. Sega began to doubt the company, Lockheed and Martin, when they failed to deliver the Model 3 arcade board when it was supposed to launch. It was supposed to come out like late 1995, but it was postponed to like mid 1996. Which Sega lost a lot of market share in the arcades. As you could tell, like Model 1 and Model 2. Well, Model 1 was kind of like a beta. Model 2 was super popular. Almost all the biggest hits of Sega have that. But if you notice, Model 3 had a really short lifespan, and they kind of moved on from it really quickly, and I'm pretty sure this has to do with it. But anyway, this is the last relationship Sega had with the company. They're a contractor for the U.S. Army, so it's a big deal. So I don't know what happened behind the scenes. Something big had to happen, but we never saw Lockheed Martin's Saturn II consoles they pitched Sega. What are your thoughts on Sega using them to design a console, and even this early into the Saturn's life cycle?
I mean, I'm not surprised at all. I think it's smart of them to be doing this, and the Saturn was kind of, I think, a lesson for them because so many of their games translate so well to home console that we saw, like with the Genesis, and the System 16 games seem to have a pretty good, shift to the Mega Drive and Genesis. Whereas the Saturn, there was really no... I mean, I guess Model 2, right? Like Virtua Fighter, but it was very difficult to port.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I think it's really smart of them to align those two so that you can still make console-exclusive games that are clearly console-made, like Shenmue or even Jet Set Radio, but then you can also open the door to the arcade developers, both porting their games and trying experimental stuff that they probably couldn't do in the arcade. So I think it's smart to combine these two. It's just a shame Model 3 was delayed, because I'm looking at the list of games. It's so small.
Yeah,
and
like,
nothing's really great. There's nothing really great on here.
Yeah, well, some people would argue that Virtua Fighter 3 is the best Virtua Fighter game ever, but I would agree with you. It's like the lifespan of the Model 3 is ridiculously short. It's like something that they did with Sega really pissed them off. So they're like, and they moved on. But I think it's interesting that they were hiring them to do this, because Sega at the past has always been in-house, you know, like they have their series of developers and hardware manufacturers. But here it seems like they were going all out and thinking of new ways of like recouping, which is weird because when we see the Sega Saturn history, everybody always paints Sega of Japan as this ignorant company that never took anybody's advice. But it feels like they were playing Damage Control while it was coming out anyway, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So during late 1995, rumors started taking off that there might be a Sega Saturn add-on called the Eclipse, which they publicly denied. This rumor stated that the Eclipse would either be an add-on that would go into the Saturn's expansion port or a standalone console. And considering how little support the 32X got for the Sega Genesis, obviously it was scrapped. Very little is known about Eclipse. Some people say they never even existed, but I put it in here because it was in the notes. What do you think about the idea of having like a console add-on? I do know there was a few rumors that there was going to be like a huge expansion slot for like Virtua Fighter 3 on the Saturn to make it run. But what do you think about something like the Eclipse? Do you think that's too much?
It sounds like something maybe the tech guys would have thought up and pitched, and it would get very quickly shot down by the marketing and CEO and, you know, the higher-ups, because they're like, guys, we're not going to do a 32X Part 2 so soon. You know, it's like they clearly knew the problems they were encountering at the time, and probably knew they did not want to go down that route again, for sure. But I mean, it's smart, I guess. It's an interesting idea, but I don't think it would have done well at all.
So, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I don't think a add-on was the answer. I think you should have, I don't know, like, Saturn is what it is. I think they should have, I think the Saturn had a lot of issues, not just hardware, but, like, I don't know. That's another discussion for another time. If you grew up in the 90s, you probably heard of competing console called the 3DO. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Which featured CDs and full motion video games. While the company failed with the 3DO, there was rumors that it was creating a much more powerful console, being codenamed M2, which don't confuse that with the company that does Sega Ages.
Oh.
Which garnered much discussion in the press. As early as 1996, the M2 was being phased as an arcade platform, which was sold to what's this company's name? Matsushita, aka Panasonic, I guess now. Right. Considering that Sega was just broke up with Lockheed Martin, they were in discussion to abandon the Model 3 platform entirely before it came out. They were going to cancel it and replace it with the M2. In February 1996, Sega ordered M2 development kits in a deal to provide them system exclusivity with games. But after months of talks, it died out. Supposedly due to egos and poor performance of the M2. I guess it wasn't up to snuff. And then the Model 3 finally released. But here's a juicy bit. Sega denied the M2 arcade rumors and said they were in talks with Panasonic about exploring the possibilities of using their upcoming platform called DVD Disc. You probably heard about that.
Yeah.
DVDs, huh? Which the company was one of the founding members of the DVD Forum, which is the group that owns the DVD format. along with Sony. Sadly, Sega partnered with Yamaha to create the GD-ROM as a standard for the Dreamcast, so all this was scrapped because Sega did not want to pay Sony, a competing, and the DVD form royalties, and it kept costs down per disc. So, as the M2, the whole project got basically canned, and I think in mid-1997, the company M2 was dead. All those years of research and stuff, but the company still made disc drives for the GameCube, Wii, and Wii U. In hindsight, the PS2 would sell a ton of consoles due to the fact that DVD actually took off as a format, being seen as Sega saving money per unit and software, but not including. I mean, do you think it was the right move by Sega to deny the DVD, even though we did not know it was going to take off? We did not know it was going to be huge. And they saved money, basically. We would have had to pay more for the Dreamcast outright.
Right. I mean, hindsight's 2020. I think at the time it was a smart move for Sega, just knowing what they knew then. Looking back, it's hard to say because, I mean, do we as fans and did Sega as a company want to move into the home entertainment video player market? I don't think they did, because when you look at the Dreamcast, the real push was online play, connectivity, chat.
Yes. It was about uniting connectivity. Everything was.
Yeah, and
everything.
I remember as a Sega fan at the time when the PS2 was coming out, I'm like, I want to play video games. I don't want to watch movies. Like who? And I always look down at people who go, "Hey, are you getting the PS2? It plays movies." And I'm like, "Are you getting the PS2 to play games?" And I remember at the time being like, I'm gonna buy a DVD player that just plays DVDs and play my games on. Now here I am with a PS4, and that's my dedicated Blu-ray player.
I don't hate that it does, but when you have to raise, okay. So right. One thing I did like about having DVDs was because you had 4 gigabytes, 8 gigabytes of storage, right?
Right.
So that was one of the good things for gaming. But outside of that, as DVD playback, I really didn't care. My parents owned a standalone DVD player.
Right.
They paid a crap load for it, but we had it. Mm-hmm. So to me, it was okay, you have to sell me on games, like you said.
For sure.
Even on the Xbox, when I had the Xbox, I never bought the add-on for the DVD. Remember, you had to buy the little wireless control, wireless remote.
Yep, and it was locked. You had to put that little thing in for it to unlock DVD playback.
Yeah, so I didn't care about it. So personally, to me, I think it's silly now looking back on it, considering we have the Switch that never played DVDs ever in its whole life.
Nintendo none never of the played. Nintendo. Yeah.
Oh, well, I think maybe Wii U did it. I'm not sure. I didn't try it, but no, they didn't. Wow, I thought it had a DVD player. Okay, that's weird. Yeah. But I'm with Nintendo. I mean, you either I don't know. That's weird. Do I care if it has it? No, but I'd rather not pay more. So yeah, I'm with this Sega on this one. It's too bad the world wasn't with us. Now
that's how it always is.
Yeah. Now we're finally getting to 1996. Great year. Everybody remembers 1996? Oh, it was fantastic.
Loved
Weather
it.
was great. Oh, yes. When Nintendo finally released the 64-bit gaming machine, the Nintendo 64. Jesus, man, when they used to brag about power. Which ate into Saturn's Japanese market share at the time. And this time, the PC marketplace continued to grow with 2 graphic standards. Power VR by Videologic and Voodoo cards by 3DFX. This is back then when it was kind of like a Wild West for a while in PC market. During this time, Sega approached both of these companies to work on the Saturn II. And up until 1997, both these companies were working on ideas for the successor of the Sega Saturn. Videologic would work in Japan with the given codename Darrell, which is one of the Virtua Fighter's boss characters. While 3DFX would work under the codename Black Belt in America. During 1997, Sega's... oh my god, dude, are you serious? Can you even say this name, Barry?
Shoichiro Irimajiri.
Dude, that's a hard name, even for Japanese people, I would assume. Assessed the projects and hired Tetsuo Yamamoto, a former IBM engineer, to work on Project Black Belt in America. Then, this guy is very important right here. Famous console creator Hideki Sato. This guy created the Master System, the Genesis. He basically worked on everything Sega's done, like all the head consoles. Not Pico. I know you're gonna get mad.
Damn it.
When he heard the news that the IBM engineer was joining the American team, he went and joined the Japanese team, which basically should have told them, your project's dead, dude. You got the legend on the Japanese team. It's over.
Right.
While both teams worked separately, and on the other side of the world, their concepts were very similar ideas. They were both having similar ideas to what they wanted the successor to be. What do you think about Sega basically? Because, when the Saturn came out, the American side was surprised. They didn't even know it was a thing. This time, they had a team in America and a team in Japan working with ideas. Do you think that was a good idea to open up, brand new, possibilities for your sequel to your failure of a Saturn?
Yeah,
I hate calling the Saturn a failure because I really like it.
No, I think it was smart to have these two teams working on it. You get different ideas from different regions, even when you're saying that the Hideki Sato team was kind of the winners just by default of having him on the team. Did they know the other one was working on it?
I think they knew that they were each on each team, but here's the thing. It's going to get really drama-filled when we get down here because, the Black Belt team really felt like Sega made false promises to them, and so did because each one had their own video card manufacturers. Like I said, Voodoo Cards and I forgot the other one was called, the Video Logic Company. They were, one of them was working on Dorel and the other one was working with the Black Belt team. Right. So two of the leading PC card manufacturers were working on each team, and we'll get to it because one of them is more popular than the other, the 3DFX company. And they did not like all this because, you'll see. Now I lost my place. See what happens when I start ranting? Unsurprisingly, Hideki Sato's Dorel Japanese team was the first team to make a big public move by announcing that Hitachi would be making the CPU for the upcoming machine. Hitachi previously worked with Sega on the 32X and the Sega Saturn. The CPU for the Dreamcast would be the Hitachi SH4 processor, which they codenamed White Belt, which would work along the NEC, I don't even know, NEC and Video Logics. Yeah, they're NEC, right? That's how they pronounce their thing.
That's how I say it.
Yeah, that's how I've always said it. Power, they worked on their Power VR Series 2 graphical chips. That's the company that basically won out in the graphic chips. They codenamed it Guppy. On the other side of the world, the Black Belt team got Western commenters writing about the project. As of 1996, 1997, 3DFX became the leader of the PC video game market. Yamamoto opted to use 3DFX's Voodoo 2 and Voodoo Banshee graphics. They also tried RISC processors and IBM and Motorola, but in the end, they also went with the Hitachi chip that they used in Dorel. So these two teams were separate, but they both came up with the same conclusion that they should use the Hitachi chip, the same one. So that's actually kind of interesting. It's I'm pretty sure it's because it was the cheapest and most powerful you could get for your price at the time. Right. So one of the main issues of the Sega Saturn... Okay, so now we're getting to how they tried to basically... You'll see. Sega Saturn lacked 3D party support due to how hard it was to develop. During this time, Sega creators would go into interviews suggesting that the Sega Saturn was actually more powerful than Sony's machine if they harnessed the power of the console. It was a completely different story with the early concepts of the Dreamcast. Project Black Belt got an early showing to developers, and one of the things developers noted was the operating system and how easy it would be to develop for. During this time, Sega just suggested they weren't interested in raw processing power, but an easy to develop for operating system. The OS was designed to quickly convert PC games. Black Belt got the blessing of Sega CEO, COO, Bernie Stolar?
Stolar.
Yeah, but it sounds better with Stolar because it sounds like it's like an energy company.
Yeah.
Who basically sealed the Sega Saturn's doom when he told press at E3 1997 that it wasn't Sega's future. In late 1997, Sega showed would-be developers such as Core Design a converted demo of Scud Race. While Sega built its legacy on arcade ports, Sega wanted a more diverse selection of games. This was one of the reasons Scud Race never got converted to Dreamcast. Screw you, Sega, I want Scud Race. Durrell Project moved forward. The Durrell Project moved forward as the primary development in 1997 with they were informing video game developers at the time to use Intel 2 powered computers at 200 megahertz with Power VR graphics as a foundation to create games for the console. So, are you surprised? You're not surprised that Durrell took over and was actually the console that Sega was going to move forward with?
No, I'm not surprised. I feel like they do this. Sega's done this before where they kind of throw the American teams a bone and they're like, you work on it too and we'll decide. And then, they're like, clearly they've decided the Japanese one are going to be moving forward. Because what would they do? Work with the Americans, or would they just take on the whole American project and internalize it in Japan? Like, I don't think so.
Yeah, and people got upset about this in America, but this is the next section we're talking about. As early as 1998, we finally got a new codename for Durrell, which they called it Katana. At this point, EA dropped support for the Saturn, and the Western version of X-Men vs. Street Fighter wasn't going to happen, which led Sega Europe to basically say that the new console was coming out in 1999.
Wow.
Sato's Power VR-based design won out, obviously, but conflicting reports came out during this time. People were saying that the Black Belt version was a more powerful console, and other people were saying that Durrell was more powerful. So nobody agreed. Yuji Naka was caught saying that. Well, he actually said that Sonic Adventure to PC was impossible due to the voodoo cards in the Katana were too powerful. So they're basically saying this is better than PC, and we see this all the time with consoles, right? Back then. Where it was like popular to say like, oh, this is the best you could get.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, which I think it's just him hyping up the console. You know how Yuji Naka was. He's a company man.
Right.
But people in America got upset because they felt like Sega was abandoning 3DFX. You gotta understand, 3DFX at this time was the leading video card company. This led to a ton of firings in Sega of America and puzzled EA, who was invested in the 3DFX company. This, along with poor Saturn sales, led EA to boycott the Dreamcast. What's your feeling about... I didn't even know about the 3DFX. I thought it was just the deal with the Saturn. They had a deal with the Saturn where they did exclusive games. And they thought that like, oh yeah, you screwed us over by announcing the Dreamcast, but it seems like they got even more angry when every move Sega was making was against EA at this point. Right. So what is your opinion of EA boycotting the Dreamcast? And I think they even had a thing where they talked about how they wanted Sega to pay an extraordinary amount to like make exclusive games. But do you think that Sega was right to just do what they wanted and not deal with EA?
I mean, in hindsight, they could have used EA on the console just to, sell more games. To be honest, I never really liked EA. I thought the 2K games were far superior, and I think they did have a pretty strong presence on the Dreamcast. I think there was a really strong NFL 2K fandom there.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I know for sure a lot of football players themselves, people in the hip-hop community, in the pop music community, they were all very into the Dreamcast and into the 2K games. And we've talked before about this. Like, even if I wasn't into those games, I loved seeing these people promoting it because it's like the hometown team. You know what I mean? Like, you see some guy promoting it, and you're like, hey, Ice-T likes it. You know?
That makes me cool by
That makes
association.
me cool. Yeah, exactly.
I did like
yeah.
that this meant that Sega could like advertise their sports games with their other games. Like they had the marketing push in America where they were like going inside the Dreamcast, and then when you went inside the Dreamcast, all their franchises were just all together.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have got that if EA was the one publishing those
For
games,
sure.
you know?
Yeah.
So, while it is not known if the Power VR 2 chip could match 3DFX's Voodoo 2 chipset in terms of performance, what is known is that NEC... wait, I screwed up these whole freaking notes. Oh, that the reason that Sega went with Power VR 2 chipset was because NEC was the one that was making them, and they partnered with Sega, so the Dreamcast was literally both their console, and they had a plant where they could basically make them cheaper at a higher rate, right? And during this time, Sega would also team up with Microsoft to develop the Windows CE. Apparently, they worked together for 2 years on this, and the idea behind Windows CE, I never knew this, by the way. When I was a kid, I was like, Microsoft worked on this console?
Right.
Because, you know, they had the Windows CE on the console, right?
Yeah.
But really, it was just an OS that they made for the Dreamcast, so it would be easy for developers to port their Windows 95 and 98 games to consoles. So if you made games for Windows 98 and 95... Windows CE would be an easy way for you to make another game on Dreamcast. They also had their own OS, Sega did, called the Dragon. But people said that the Dragon was actually easier to develop for and was faster, and they let you tap into more power. So I guess it could have been worthless, but Sega wanted every developer to come in, even if they were not harnessing all the power, right?
Right.
Sega finally showed off the Sega Dreamcast at the Sega New Challenge Conference on May 21st, 1998. I almost said 88.
Well, it would have been like Shenmue then, where he was playing Dreamcast in the 80s, right? Or Saturn.
Yeah, Saturn,
everything shifted back. Anyway.
Yeah. They intended to release the unit in Japan on November 1998. Rumor has it that the console was set to reveal on May 10th, but it would clash with Final Fantasy VIII's announcement, so Sega, I guess, pushed it to the 21st, which, who cares? I would have been
cares?
Like, yeah,
Final Fantasy
yes,
VIII.
Square. Yeah.
Garbage.
God, get out of here. Anyway, the Dreamcast's final name was one of 5,000 ideas brought forward by a company, Interbrand. According to Electronic Gaming Monthly pool, it was suggested that most U.S. readers liked the name Katana the best with 37% of the votes, the Dreamcast with 15% of the votes, Black Belt last with 4% of the votes, and 30% of readers hated all of them. What's your thoughts on the name Dreamcast, and like, you think it was a good name overall?
Well, first off, Katana, like, you gotta imagine, like, what's that term, weeb?
Weeb, yeah.
I feel like all of these, like, anime-loving Americans were like,
Well, the katana. You know, like, that's the best because that's what a samurai like me would use.
Of course.
But what I love about the name the Dreamcast is it goes against all the other Sega naming conventions, which sound really hard-driving, really epic, like Mega Drive, Master System. Dreamcast maybe had a little more in common with the name Saturn, just because it felt so disconnected from technology and that hard-driving sort of tech kind of sound. But I loved it because it sounded so soft and inviting, and the console was white, and even the commercials had that like floaty kind of I don't know, ethereal or like ghost-like sort of feel to them, even with the it's thinking.
Yes.
And I love the name. I've heard different takes on it. I've heard people say it's because it's like a broadcast, but it's a Dreamcast or something like that. Have you ever heard people explain the name? I didn't know if Sega ever actually gave an official
I heard it was like catching dreams, like a dream catcher.
Right.
I heard that before. I heard the one you say kind of makes sense, right? Because part of the Dreamcast was connectivity.
Yeah.
And casting is probably part of that when you cast live or whatever. So
Right.
I could see stuff like that for sure, yeah. But I don't know. I've never heard the explanation for the name, and I don't know. I do know that orange meant good luck or whatever. That's why the logo was orange, right? Is that the report?
We could get into the logos, but I might do that in a different video.
Oh, now I lost my place again. All right. The console got reintroduced to the gaming public during E3 1998 with Sega of American president Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders showing off the prototype of the Dreamcast in red. The prototype was in red when he first showed it. They promised an autumn 1999 release date with 20 to 30 launch games. No games were showing at E3 this year, but some tech demos did make the rounds. Sadly, press were forbidden to take photos and discuss what they showed. Here's a picture of Bernie right here. What do you think about the red early Dreamcast without any Sega fonts or logos on it?
Looking back, it looks like a fan painted a Dreamcast.
Right.
I
also
think
had the round button.
I don't like that. It doesn't look right. It just seems off because I love how the controller and the console look the same. Like, I think that's really cool. It's fine. I mean, I would have bought a red Dreamcast, no question. But
they were really thinking at this time, what color should we do it? And like, I've seen this one, and I've seen another one that was, I think, yellow, that Yuji Naka prototype that he was showing off. I think white was the way to go.
Yeah. I see people online who are like hardcore, like it had to be black. Sega makes black consoles. Black is beautiful. But I mean, I'm holding a Dreamcast here. This is actually just a shell. It's empty. It's actually one of my few shells I have. It's magic on the inside. But you look at the design of it, and there's so many little elements that would just have gotten lost if this was a dark color. You know, like, and I have the Sega Sports one. You look at it, and everything's black. Like the buttons don't stand out. The little triangle doesn't stand out. The little like dots. I love the little dots. They're unnecessary, but they're just so cool. And it looks so nice and white. Mine's kind of yellowing, but it actually looks pretty good here. But I mean I could go on and on about the design of the Dreamcast. I think it's just look at that curve. It's so beautiful.
It's a very, very beautiful console. I think that's it's cute. It's small. It's I don't know, man. I think probably Sega's best designed console.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion. I guess people like when I saw the PS2, the early model, I was like, this is ugly as shit. Huge, very like it kind of looked like a Tombstone, to be honest. I do think that their sequel, their Mini, when they re-released it was a lot better. But yeah, the Dreamcast had launch issues. Oh my god, are you surprised?
No.
Due to a lack of power VR chips. They had a high failure rate in the manufacturing process. More than half of the limited stock was already sold in pre-order in Japan, though. But the console did launch in Japan on November 27, 1994, for the price of 29,000 Japanese yen. All available units sold out day one. The Japanese launch only included 4 games: Godzilla Generations, July, Pin Tricylon, Virtua Fighter 3TB. The only title that actually sold well, unsurprisingly, was Virtua Fighter 3 TB. According to reports, Sega could have sold an additional 300,000 units if they had proper stock. That's I would consider that a successful launch.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of the selection of games in Sega Japan? Because we got like a fucking we lucked out in America. For sure.
Yeah, no, Sega Japan's launch was abysmal. I've been playing and collecting Dreamcast, talking about it for years. But I've been told time and time again from people, avoid Godzilla Generations. I haven't even heard of July. I forgot about that game. Pen Trisalon, like, try it. You can get it for cheap. It's not that great. And Virtua Fighter 3TB, I always hear is, like, not that great.
Yeah. But
like, none of these are great. None of them are good.
Pin is one of those games that, like, launched everywhere because it's going to be in America too. But, like, I remember first seeing that game and I'm like, what is this crap?
Yeah.
I remember my friend called me over. He's like, we got a couple other games. Why did you get this? Because it was super cheap.
Yeah.
It like dropped down so fast. So if you had a Dreamcast a couple months later, you could have not afford not to have this game. If you were looking for new games to play. The next major release was in the U.S., which came out, guess when? September 9, 1999. They included 19 titles to buy day one. Maybe I miscounted this, but I'm pretty sure it's 19.
Many.
Including Eurowing, Air Force Delta, Blue Sting, Cart Flag to Flag, Expendables, The House of the Dead 2, Hydro Thunder, Monaco Grand Prix, Mortal Kombat Gold, NFL 2K, NFL Blitz 2000, Pin again, Power Stone, Ready to Rumble Boxing, Sonic Adventure, Soul Calibur, TNN Motorsports, Hardcore Heat, Tokyo Extreme Racer, and Trick Style. Do you remember being hyped? Yeah, you remember being hyped.
Fuck yeah, man.
Man. I was gonna say, which of these games did you play, and which ones you think are like top tier on here? Because I mean, a lot of them are pretty damn great.
A lot of these are really great. Some of them are forgettable, but I will say every single one of these were incredibly smart launch titles, because you look at this and you just take these, they cover every single genre at the time, I think. And some of them are still, disputed to be like the best games in their respective genres by some people. Let's just, I guess, just like run through here real quick. I think Arrow Wings and Air Force Delta, they're fine. I have both of them. But if you like flight combat, they're good. Blue Stinger, it's an interesting adventure game. If you like the Resident Evil games, things like that, it's worth checking out. It's got some some voice acting, some interesting stuff, but it's fun. Flag to Flag, if you're a fan of The Sopranos, AJ plays this on one episode, and Tony goes, "Hey, turn that thing off." So you got that. Expendable, isn't that like a shoot 'em up, like a 3D shoot 'em up?
I never played it. I don't remember. I haven't. I can't.
I bought a lot of these games. Maybe played them for like 20 minutes. Like late, like maybe a couple years ago. But Expendables, fine. House of the Dead 2 is awesome. Hydro Thunder is awesome, but it's a real shame that they screwed up all of the Hydro Thunder, and I'm trying to think what else it was. Mortal Kombat Gold. Midway screwed up all their games. Remember that? You had to rebuy them or send them back or something. Yeah, and the way to tell them is the one on the label with the hot news sticker. It's like a green sticker that's printed on. The problem is
let me guess, those are rare now.
They're not rare, but the problem is now in the used game market, people will, like, they might have a disc and then they'll just pop it into whatever case they have. So unless you can, like, take a look at the disc and figure out you're getting the right one. I unfortunately bought Hydro Thunder and had the screwed up disc where it would, like, goof up on me. And I had that for years. Same with Ready to Rumble boxing, unfortunately. But I won't outstay my welcome here, but Monaco Grand Prix is fine. Mortal Kombat Gold's cool. NFL 2K is awesome. NFL Blitz 2000 is kind of unnecessary because of 2K. Pen is stupid, but if you like cutesy crap, that's fine. Power Stone's awesome. Ready Rumble 1 is awesome. Sonic Adventure is awesome. Soul Calibur is must own. TNN Motorsports, Hardcore Heat, who cares? Tokyo Extreme Racer is cool, and Trick Style is pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember Blue Stinger. I remember a bunch of my friends growing up, like when in school, when we were like trying to run the mile or whatever, and we were talking during it. Everybody's like, "You gotta play Blue Stinger, man. It's so good, man. So good." And then I I rented it and I hated it.
Yeah.
But I think it's because I played Code Veronica at the time already.
Yeah.
And going back to this, it's like, oh my god, Capcom just like knocked it out of the park with Code Veronica.
Right. Yeah.
So
and I mean,
to me, it's like, oh yeah, I can't go back to this.
Yeah, and at the time of launch, I only played NFL 2K, which I rented because even not being a sports guy, I wanted to see the graphics. I bought the console with Sonic Adventure. I got Power Stone soon after, and a lot of my purchases were based on that demo disc. So I didn't get Ready to Rumble until much later, but I played the demo a lot because
me too.
The demo kind of gives you everything you get from the retail game.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah,
It's not...
I mean, they had the training mode or some crap, but like, when you played it, like, what do you want to do? You and your friends want to sit in your living room and knock each other out. The demo was good enough for that. You can only pick one or two characters, but it was fun enough where I was like, I've had enough of this game.
Yeah.
But yeah, House of the Dead 2 is, oh my god, I love that game. It's such a great game. It's so gory. Even the new Scarlet Dawn isn't that gory. So, play that game. The European launch. Can we all play Sad Sounds right here, because it's not the worst launch, but it's puzzling because it came out after September, right? We got it first, and then they got it in October 14th, 1999, and they only had 10 titles, including Blue Stinger, Dynamite Cop, Expandable, Incoming, Pin, which was actually just called Pin in Europe, Sega Rally Championship 2, Sega Bass Fishing, Sonic Adventure, Toy Commander, which is awesome, Virtua Fighter 3TB. What is your? Why didn't we get 3TB? What? What is your? Did we? I mean, let me relook. I don't think we did. Maybe it was a launch window title.
Maybe it was. I don't see it here.
I'm pretty sure Sega probably like held it back because they were like, oh, can they really compete with Power Stone and all these other games? We should probably hold it back for a bit.
Yeah, I think. Okay, first off, like, no offense to our European listeners, but like October 14th is such an arbitrary, forgettable date. And I know sometimes I'm on Twitter and out of nowhere, mid-October, I'll see people going, "Hey, oi, big ups to the Dreamcast Massive," and it'll be like, man. I'll be like, "What are you talking? Oh, yeah, you got the thing like third, and the date's forgettable, and you only had 10 games, and nothing against them." But it's like
they're great people.
It's kind of forgettable. And
you're talking about the Dreamcast junkyard, right? Those people.
Yeah, they talk about blue swirls all the time. I'm sick of it.
What is that? This blue swirl? I've been hearing about it on the internet. What is it?
But I will say, Toy Commander is excellent, and it's cool. It's cool that they got Dynamite Cop at launch because that's a really great game too.
It is.
Yeah, but like and I mean, we could do a whole show about the blue swirl.
We should do a whole documentary, 10-hour documentary about the blue swirl.
Yeah, but I will say, and this is like a little aside, there's been a big resurgence of like Dreamcast history. We've had a lot of books. There's some on my shelf, some are incoming. Every single time though, it's a Brit, and they're always bringing their views of the Dreamcast. And it's interesting to me, but the European Dreamcast launch and like the whole marketing and everything behind it is the third most interesting to me. Like, no offense, but like I feel like I've heard...
The Japanese one was strange. Like they had that guy with the nerdy glasses. That's strange. We had a few of them, but I agree. Yeah, I agree.
I just feel like the story of the Japanese one has not been told properly in the West. The American one, I feel, we all feel like we know it, but no one's really encapsulated it into a book or a documentary. But then all these Brits are making these documentaries and these books, and every single time they use the blue swirl, and they talk about their games, and I'm so interested in their experience, but it's always used like as the first thing they talk about and the first thing you see, and I'm like, you guys are like third. So, no offense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk down on them, but my favorite color has always been orange, my whole life. And I remember when I saw the swirl and it was orange, I was like, this console is meant for me, man. I don't know, man. So,
and can I?
If I was European, it wouldn't be made for me. I would be a PlayStation 2 fan. So,
And I'm gonna keep this very brief about the swirl too. People have been going around online saying there's the blue swirl, the red swirl, and the orange swirl.
The orange swirl.
There's only two swirls. There's the blue swirl, and there's an orangey red swirl. And I know people, they look at company colors and they go, oh, Target's red, CVS is red, Walgreens is red, but Staples is red. They're all different kind of reds. And when you look at the Dreamcast is actually an orange with kind of a red shift, or you could argue a red with an orange shift, depending on how you view color. And when you look at the Dreamcast American console and you look at the Japanese console, this is the same color on the lid, and the startup orange is the same. I even captured footage of a Dreamcast from America and Japan, and I used a little Photoshop eyedropper and checked. It's the same color. The only times that you're going to be seeing like color differentiation is because of printing issues with like magazines or third parties who look at it and they see red, so they use red, and they're not actually following company guidelines. I have heard people say that Sega of America used red for certain things, whereas Japan used orange, and there are cases of that, but every time it's like on maybe some print ad used a few times, or it's the Japanese packaging uses more of an orange. However, if you look at it, the swirl is white on orange. It's not an orange swirl. It's a white swirl. So if anything, it's orangish red in America, blue in Europe, and like white and orangish red, the same one as America. And I could get into it more, but it's something that really, really bothers me. And I'm really scared that coming up on this 20th anniversary, the official Sega accounts are going to have people going, hey, vote your favorite color, swirl, red, orange, or blue. And I'm like, no, don't perpetuate the myth.
Don't.
The lie.
Let's breathe.
I'm going to do an InfoWars style video series where I'm like...
Were you just like screaming?
Yeah.
I'm done. Innovative features. Let's move on to innovative features. We're going to be talking about swirls all day, and then people in the audience are going to be like, damn, Barry really, really, really likes the logo.
They like when I do that. They love it.
So the Dreamcast brought innovative features. So a lot of people think that like the Sega Master System, the Sega Genesis, the Sega Saturn gave Sega this whole like they're on the cutting edge of everything. To me, I think it was the Dreamcast. I think the Dreamcast did crazy things that just like blew everybody's mind, even if they didn't buy the console, but they were blown away, right?
Yeah.
So I put a list of some of them. A built-in online modem, which gave everybody online access to online gaming. Before this, there was some online add-ons you could buy, but the main feature was that everybody had it, right? 10 million people bought the Dreamcast, 10 million people had the ability to go online. That's insane. As we know now, like, Kinect, it's cool that they sold 20 million, but why would you make a game when you can make games for 80 million people that bought the Xbox One, right?
Yeah.
Or the Xbox 360. So the idea that every single one of them had the ability was huge at the time. So tell us some of your, like, I guess, early online gaming memories, and, like, did you think at this time that this was a big innovative feature, or did you just go like, oh, I guess that's something?
No, absolutely. I thought it was a huge innovative feature. I used my Dreamcast as like a dedicated like light PC in my room, like for web browsing, viewing videos, downloading things. Because you got to remember, like, internet speeds on the Dreamcast were what you were getting on your computer. The only difference was, you couldn't really save files. You couldn't like do any work or anything. But it was great if you wanted to read the news on websites. And here's a little secret for you guys.
Oh, God.
Your parents can't check the history, so you can actually view the porn on your Dreamcast, and no one ever knew that you were looking at boobs. So that was my...
Oh,
that's another secret I think a lot of people don't want to talk about, but they should.
Yeah, me and my friends would stay up all night looking at boobies and butts.
But
it was so lame though, because you had to go to these free sites, no video obviously, or like really bad video. It was pretty dodgy.
I remember, though, there were sites that played videos and they would promote that they worked on the Dreamcast. You would search you would search Dreamcast porn site, and I'm whispering.
Should have been friends back then.
I'm whispering like
Your
mom's in the
mom.
room or something. But you would
like,
whisper, guys, POS, parent over shoulder. But you would visit it and it would say like compatible with PDAs and your Dreamcast or something like that. But no, I love the online. I played Phantasy Star Online a ton. I think I dabbled in all the other ones. I wish I played, Choo Choo Rocket and Alien Front Online more. I probably only logged like 5 hours or so on some of those online games. But the fact that I've tried them all means a lot to me. I downloaded a lot of funny and dirty images for Jet Set Radio.
Jet Set Radio?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I do believe... Was Tub Girl a thing at the time? Because I know...
No, I don't think so. I think there was like random like gross gore things. I remember that.
there were some like nasty pictures and people would put them in Jet Set Radio and like scare their cousin or something. Hey, play this new Sega game.
I do remember like Planet Web, and you could like download saves. That blew my mind because like having people over, you're like, hey, let's play Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and then you're like, oh, I erased my save file. Now we have to sit here and wait for hours so that characters can unlock.
And like you just brought up Planet Web. Planet Web and Booyaka are two sites that I would use constantly, and like I feel as nostalgic and for them as people probably do now about like YouTubers or like their favorite news websites like segabits.com or something like that. But it's like I look back at those and I'm like you just brought them up, and that brings such fond memories of browsing the new downloads, the new save files and stuff. It was so cool, and I think that actually
Yeah, I was gonna say that like when I did that, I was mind blown. I remember my cousins were like, "You could just download save files from the internet." I'm like, "Yeah," and so all my cousins would do is go and like pick a game that I had in the library, and they would like look for a save file at a certain point so they could experience that part of the game. That was crazy cool. So I like that. I also spent a lot of time with my friends we would go to my friend's house who had the Dreamcast at his house. Mm-hmm. And we would go in IRC rooms because Sega had IRC rooms back then, and we would just chat with people around the world. It was really cool. Sometimes we would troll. I think this is something people forget on Twitter where they get offended. They're like, "This person's cursing me out." They gotta forget that like when I was 13 when this came out, I was just trolling people on the internet. Like, that's what you did as a kid.
Yeah.
You don't have a sense of, like, oh, these people are offended. No, you just went in there and with your friends, eating junk food, drinking soda, barely watched South Park, the movie. So you're, like, potty mouth to the maximum. So I had great memories with the Dreamcast. The online modem was ridiculous. It was, like, my first home internet access, really, because like I didn't have my parents couldn't afford a computer until like I don't know, I bought one when I graduated high school, so like this is the first time I could ever get online, so that's pretty good. And the next one is the Virtual Memory Unit, the VMU, which was literally the last cycle of memory cards, because after this we got the hard drives with the Xbox and then Xbox 360. This one had basically a screen, a black and white screen with D-pad and buttons, which I thought was crazy at the time, which allowed players, and you could connect them, and you could play against other people, the mini games, or swap files. Another connectivity thing, right? This is the whole thing with the Dreamcast. It was about connecting you with other people. So tell me a little bit about your VMU history and like, what's your thoughts on the VMU overall, I guess?
My VMU history. So when I got my Dreamcast, I got the Sonic Adventure with it, and I started playing, and then I realized, and we've talked about this, I think when we did the Sega Talk Sonic Adventure episode, I couldn't save my game, and I was so confused, and then I realized, oh, I have to buy a thing to save? Doesn't it have it internally, like with a battery? But nope. It should have had, I think, looking back, they really should have done, like, 40 blocks built in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
There's no reason they couldn't have done that.
And it's kind of weird because the Saturn had that. So when I got it, I was like, okay, when I got the Saturn, I was confused because it was like, you go from having a Genesis and a Super Nintendo that just saves on cartridge.
Yeah.
And then you get a Sega Saturn, which has built-in memory, which you have to use a battery.
Right.
And then you get a Dreamcast, and now it has a VMU, which is a totally different thing. And I was like, whoa, okay. But yeah, go on.
And it was weird because looking at them now, like when your VMU runs out of battery, it still saves your game. So there was no reason they couldn't put blocks into the Dreamcast itself. But I think they wanted to sell those VMUs. But when I finally got it, I was saving. I was swapping files with friends at school. I was doing everything that Sega promoted and told us to do. And it was a lot of fun. I loved it.
I met a guy, literally, we became friends because he was coming to school, and he would always brag that his dad was like, his parents were divorced, and his dad was always buying him stuff. And he pulled out his keys one time to show everybody, like, the group of friends, like, look, man, I got my dad lets me drive his car. And then when he pulled out his keys, which were not car keys, they were just house keys, by the way. He had a VMU attached to it because, in the VMU on the bottom, it has a little hook.
Yeah.
And he had it hooked up like that. And I was like, wait, you have a Dreamcast? And, like, during this, like, time, like, the Dreamcast was really kind of newer and not that many people at that school had it. Mm-hmm. So we would always swap games. We would always talk about it. He would have all the latest games. So his dad did buy him a lot of stuff, obviously. And and him having the VMU, that really, basically made me a friend with a guy that had like a ton of games and let me explore a bunch of genres of games I probably wouldn't have if it wasn't for the VMU.
Yeah.
Console to handheld link. This is more of a minor one. I did never use this, but I did play the Neo Geo Pocket. So basically, this allowed you to connect the Dreamcast to the Neo Geo Pocket with a special link to share content. This idea was later used by Nintendo with the GameCube, which would link to the GBA. Both of them didn't really have that much content, but the Nintendo GameCube link to the GBA had more content overall. But I think this is just a thing that SNK probably pitched to Sega, and Sega's like, all right, we'll sell you the cable thing. Why not?
Yeah.
So, you ever played the Neo Geo Pocket, and do you ever remember this being a thing?
I've played a Neo Geo Pocket Color. It's still on my to-get list. I feel like every time I pass it up, it's because I don't want to drop like $80. Which seems to be like the going rate. They have not really gone down, and they haven't really gone up. But there's just so few games on it, and the link cables. I went to Video Games New York about 10 years ago, and they had tons of them. And now I guess they're kind of expensive, and I kind of wish I got one then, even though I didn't have a Neo Geo Pocket, because they were like $20 each, new in box. I don't know how much they are now, but they're definitely not 10 or $20.
Definitely.
Yeah. So it's not. Yeah. Nah.
I never heard about the Neo Geo Pocket like growing up. Well, growing up, the only reason I heard about it was because someone in the bus had it, and they sold me that and the Game Boy Color for like $50. So technically, I won out the deal because they're worth more now.
Yeah.
And so they sold them to me both, and I was like, I've never heard of this. And then I started like play. He only had one game. It was like, I think it was the Metal Slug one. And I really liked it because I liked Metal Slug in the arcades, so that's the reason I wanted it. But I never used the link cable. I don't even know what you would use it for. I'm assuming the Sonic game that was on it.
I don't think so. I think King of Fighters and Cool Cool Toon and some Japanese only titles used it. So nothing too amazing, and I think it just unlocked content.
It was a cool idea, but you had the VMU already, so
yeah.
Not really needed. Another one is HD gaming, which this is kind of rough depending on what your definition of HD is. Some people say 720p and up, but the Dreamcast supported 480p, which is obviously way crisper than just doing your composite cables, because it supported VGA. very few games did not support it. So most games supported it, at least from what I've gathered. For me, I used it after, like, I never knew this was a thing when I had the Dreamcast. I only played it on a regular TV, and I didn't really think much about it.
Yeah.
But then my friend was, one of my friends was like, had it, and it looked way better.
Yeah.
That convinced me I needed a VGA adapter. I bought one. I don't regret it. I wish all games supported it. What's your thing on VGA? I think it's the best way to play.
Yeah, no, I got my HD TV. It still is. I still have it. It's a 42-inch 720p plasma from Panasonic. I think I got it in 2000. Man, it's hard to say. 2010 maybe 2011. I don't know. But that's around the same time. Dreamcast Junkyard. I was writing for them, doing stuff for them, and I was learning about the VGA box. So I did pick one up. I had to get an VGA to HDMI adapter, which required its own power source. So I had two things hooked up that I had to have both of them plugged in to work. But it looked beautiful, and I would use it for streams, and I would use it, just whenever. And I wouldn't stretch the game, but I would use that. I don't know if your TV has this mode, but it stretches just the sides, and it keeps everything else normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would do that, and sometimes I would do streams, and people would get upset with me, but I'm like, the center part's fine. Like, it's not, like, I know I'm a purist, too, when it comes to that kind of stuff, but I wanted to fill my screen, and I didn't want to crop it or stretch it, so that was, like, the next best thing.
And that's the only thing I wrote down for innovative features. Is there something you think I'm missing right here? I think this would do it, right? The internet, the VMU, the HD gaming is probably the biggest things, right?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the one I'm holding, like, there's those little ports on the bottom that didn't really get used much.
And we'll talk about what they might have been used for right now. And concepts, this is actually the most interesting bit because these are concepts that never made it. But the first one was a wireless controller. The Dreamcast was supposed to launch with a wireless controller. Sato talked about it before that he really wanted a wireless controller, but they couldn't get the VMU to work on it. So that got scrapped. Dreamcast DVD Player, due to PS2's DVD feature taking off, Sega had an accessory add-on idea to combat the hype. Sega always said that one day the Dreamcast would play DVD, which is false, it never did, which led them to showing off this DVD unit called the Dreamcast DVD Player. Some people rumored that it was just a shell and that Sega never provided any information on it and it never showed up again. Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on that? Like, you think that Sega actually had a plan for this? Or do you think that it's all BS?
I remember we talked when we interviewed the official Dreamcast magazine people. We were like, did you ever see this thing working? They said nope. They just saw it sitting out and they were told that it was something that was going to happen. So I don't think there was ever a working one. The idea of that accessory, though, I mean, it could work on the bottom, but then you have two disk drives, which is kind of silly, and we'll get into the zip drive one soon. I also am reminded of the, what was it, the Xbox 360 had an HD DVD add-on, right?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah,
it was pretty much a massive failure.
Yeah, it was really ugly looking, so I'm glad they didn't do that. I think I would have preferred it if they released a DVD player Dreamcast, but by that point it was so late in the lifespan that it would have been a mistake.
For sure. I agree with that. The next one we're talking about is the zip drive. Sega touted an unreleased add-on for the Dreamcast that would allow people to store data on a zip drive, which was supposed to be the format to overtake the floppy disk on PC. Mm-hmm. This would allow users to save online data like new maps for Quake, as an example, on a zip drive, which would offer 100 MB of storage. Holy crap, what do you do with that much storage? According to reports, the zip drive made it to the late stages of development and would have cost $200 USD retail and was meant to come out the third quarter of 2000. Personally, to me, I'm glad they canceled this because $200 for a zip drive, and you gotta understand, at this point in 1999, zip drive was already kind of dead. Like I remember, like I never even heard of zip drive until when I took a computer class and they talked about obscure technologies and they brought it out, and I'm like, ugh, why? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know if we had a zip drive at home, but I remember using zip disks for things. But the idea, I guess what I don't like about this idea is that, and I'm kind of looking at behind me, I have this piano. It's a Roland XP60. It has a disk drive on it, and the disk drive, it uses all these different functions that are great for the piano, but just in terms of storage, one disk is enough. One little floppy disk. It's not even a zip disk. You put it in there, and that's more than enough to save thousands of songs because it's just using sequencer data. And so when you're looking at this, like 100 megabytes of storage, that's basically all you need. There's no need to switch them out. It's stupid on a few levels. One, it makes the VMU unnecessary, and wouldn't they want to sell VMUs? Two, like I said, one disk and you're done. Like you're probably not going to be ejecting that disk anytime soon because the Dreamcast has internet, so you're not going to be needing to go onto your computer to put saves. And that thing's going to have all the saves you're ever going to want. Like I don't know how much storage space does a VMU have? Do you know off the top of your head?
No, I don't. It wasn't like 5 megabytes.
Was it really?
I have no idea. I don't know. I just know that it had blocks. That's it.
Right. It had 200 blocks. And so, okay, 28 kilobytes? Is that what I'm seeing?
Damn, that's small.
Yeah, 56 block. Oh, okay, so 100 kilobytes is 200 blocks. So, I'm not going to do the math now, but you look at that. So 100 megabyte. How many kilobytes are in a megabyte?
1,000 now? I would assume so, or around there.
Let's do some sloppy math. So 100 times 1,000, that's like having 100,000 kilobytes, right? And
but then you also had to pay $200. Like that's how much it cost in launch. The console.
This is like having 1,000 VMUs on one disc. And I have over 200 Dreamcast games. Each one has a save file, and I probably have 10 or 15 VMUs, and I'm good.
So you want a zip drive?
I do. I would need a zip drive, but anyway, a stupid idea. Next,
this is the one I actually really liked at the time when it was being hyped. The VMU MP3 player. The VMU MP3 music player was showing off at Tokyo Game Show 2000. That would allow you to hook up your controller, basically like a VMU, and it had a headphone jack. And it would allow you to store up to 64 megabytes of music, which is kind of a little bit in today's standards. Mm-hmm. The suggested retail would have been under 100 USD. According to IGN DC, Sega was working with MP3.com store to be their partner for this.
Yeah.
Obviously, it never happened. I wonder why it never happened. Maybe it just didn't work as expected. But would you have rocked a VMU MP3 player?
Oh, absolutely. I remember reading about this, and I was like, this is going to be my first MP3 player. That's awesome. It's going to work with my Dreamcast. It's going to play games. And this was when I was like, now I can truly carry my VMU around and have like a use for it. I thought it was so cool.
Yeah, and not only that, it has 64 megabytes of memory, which would make it the biggest VMU that you could buy.
Yeah,
so that would have been slick.
Unnecessary.
For sure.
Yeah.
And the last one, or at least the last major accessory that never made it, was Swatch Access for Dreamcast. I don't know much about this. I know you talk about this a lot more than I do, so if I screw something up, you can let me know. It was a planned addition to the Dreamcast to interface with Swatch Access watches, a series of watches with one or two types of data chips inside them. One was ski data, which would allow you to get info from ski resorts, and another chip, and another one was to like pay for things. I guess some of the examples they used was drinks, public transport, museum passes, and an example that they were working on was buying movie tickets and using your watch as a confirmation.
That's cool.
The thing that's interesting about this is basically what we use our phones for now, right?
Yep.
Sega had this idea back in 2000.
Yeah. No, it's basically Apple Wallet, but it's really
Sega
cool.
version.
And I think the MP3 player combined with this would have been really awesome. I actually really loved the direction Sega were starting to head right before the demise of the Dreamcast, because I liked how they were infusing the Dreamcast into your day-to-day life, but in
like a lifestyle.
Like a lifestyle, but they were doing it smartly. Like with the PlayStation 2, they were just straight up, it plays movies. Hey, Sony makes some movies. Like, that was it. You know, there was very little else there. But with the Dreamcast, they're like, well, it's connective, it has online. So they were looking at things like, you know, MP3 music and going to movies. Like, you don't need to put a DVD player in here because the Dreamcast is not a movie machine. It's a video game and you know, like interconnectivity, internet device. And so I think that was really smart of them. I don't know if it would have been a very lucrative direction to go, but like I would have been all in. Like I would have been one of those 5 guys along with, you know, you, me, and like 3 other people would have been like living this lifestyle, and we would look back and be like, man, it was great. I had my music, I had my movie tickets on my phone from my Dreamcast. It was great, you know. But
it's funny because like Apple literally like maybe a decade after this, or even more, like even like Google Pay or whatever, Samsung Pay.
Yeah.
It's barely gaining traction now, right? Like not everybody's using it, but back then Sega already had the idea for this like ridiculously like 20 years ago. So it's like, okay. It's like so far ahead of the curve. And how much money did the iPod make for Apple? That's the thing where it's like, could have had that money, but it didn't work out because of the Dreamcast. Because in the end of the day, all this was going to be tied to a Sega console. Like they could have expanded it and made a PC too, or Apple, and then like beat Apple to the punch. But you know, could have, should have, would have. You know,
didn't.
Yeah. So let's talk about the sad ending to this tale.
Yes, I will play. I will. Yeah, play the sad role of talking about the demise of the Dreamcast. So on January 30th, 2001, Sega announced an end for the hardware, and they gave the date of March 31st, 2001, as being when they would cease production of the Dreamcast. And, you know, when you hear about these dates, a lot of people think January 30th was the death of the Dreamcast, March 31st was the death of the Dreamcast. Really, these dates are kind of arbitrary to consumers. They don't mean much. It was really just timed to the company's financial report for 2001. So they were tying the losses on the console to that financial year. Beyond January 30th, 2001, Sega were still making consoles and releasing games. Beyond March 31st, they were still selling consoles and they were still releasing games. There was still, I mean, I remember at the time they were saying, there's still games to come. We're not totally, you know, giving up, but come 2002, you better be looking elsewhere because you're not going to be getting much. And you know, this was a surprise to us. I learned about it on Tech TV, I think. Adam Sessler breaking the news. My dad was like, I think my dad might have heard something during the day in the newspaper or from someone saying, did you hear something about Dreamcast like ending? And I'm like, what? And I turned on Tech TV and Adam Sessler was talking about it. And I kind of like didn't like him after that because he broke the news to me. And the funny thing is we saw him, unbeknownst to us, or at least to me, at the Sonic 25th anniversary event. And I looked at him and I thought to myself, that guy kind of looks like Roger Craig Smith, but that's not Roger Craig Smith. Who is that? He looks familiar.
I also saw him at a public Sega event, well, way back in 2008 too. So I guess they had the G4. It was the last day time of that station, and I guess Sega used to have their building at the same building as where they filmed that show. So he showed up. He was there looking at games too at the time. It was 2000, because it was like Sonic Chronicles was being shown off.
Oh wow, great
game!
You know,
so much hope, hope.
This was a surprise to Sega fans, of course. I mean, like as I mentioned, I found out on the TV. The shift to Sega becoming a third-party publisher, however, was in the works internally as early as 1999, with Isao Okawa claiming that the Dreamcast would be Sega's last console and that the future was third-party, online-centric software development. You kind of saw this with the MP3 player and stuff like branching out into other fields. This vision also was shared by many at Sega of America, including Peter Moore and even founder David Rosen. Were you surprised that Sega was planning this end so early, or is this not news to you?
No, I mean, when the Dreamcast came out, even though people praised the console, even though people praised the software, even though people praised the online, there was always these I don't know, this the way they would frame it would always be like, but is this enough?
Yeah.
Is this another failure? Like, as early as when they first showed it, it was always like a haunting doom on the console. And I think that's what made me and other people I knew get so hardcore into the console. Like, there was this weird feeling with the Dreamcast, like, you wanted this to succeed. Like, other consoles, whatever, I'll play some games on it. Oh, cool. Sega Genesis, like, they already had momentum, so you don't really feel like you're fighting this, like, weird thing. To me, the Dreamcast was the first one where I was, like, actively reading about it, actively hoping that it would succeed, thinking that every month was just releasing a great game.
Yeah.
And then finally, it's just to no avail, I guess. I read it in, like, a magazine. That's how ignorant I was. Like, I would not watch TV when I was younger. Like, I would go to school, hang out with my friends, and then play video games. I did not want to watch TV. I didn't have cable. I don't have public TV, so I had no interest in watching TV outside of, like, maybe Simpsons reruns.
Smart.
So I read it in a magazine, and I was shocked. I was like, why? Like, what the hell? You guys, like... I'm like, you guys had all these games. Why are you guys just abandoning all this thing? Like, you guys have a format with online. You had all this stuff. And it's done.
And it was this thing, too. I think really what it was, I think, so early as you see here internally, 1999, they were talking about ending it eventually. I think the problem is that not everyone was all in with the Dreamcast. I feel like after the Saturn, the thought was, well, this is how we operate. We release another console. And then after the Dreamcast, we release another console, and so on and so on. Like, I think at companies like at Sony PlayStation, they're not thinking, is PlayStation 4 the end? Like, they know 4, 5, 6, 7. Like, they're a machine. They're going to keep making them. But
I was going to say, there was that Sato interview where he talked to the president. I'm going to paraphrase it, but Sato, the guy that created all these consoles, was saying that during the Saturn, he went and talked to the PlayStation 1 president. I forget his name. Kutagara. I forget. He was basically saying that Sega could never compete against them because Sony makes everything like a factory in the cheapest price possible because they have they own everything. Sega doesn't own anything. They have to go to other people and bargain for pricing. Right. So you'll never undercut them. So it's just that you're fighting basically a losing battle. And really, I think that's what did it for them. Like, they could never gained that game that was Mario 64 or Final Fantasy 7.
Right.
Levels of success.
Right. And I think, though, Sega could have continued to chug along, probably release another console after the Dreamcast. But that would really have required everyone to be all in, all hands on deck, put the blinders on, ignore the financial results, ignore what people are telling us. And you've seen that in the past with the add-ons. They'll do things that on paper seem stupid, but they'll do it anyway because they just want to keep forging on ahead, keeping the Dreamcast alive, or keeping, the Saturn alive, keeping the Dreamcast alive. But I think at this point, this was when the grown-ups had to step in and say, it's done. Like it's, in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, when Indy still wants to reach the Grail and his dad's like, let it go, Junior, let it go, son. That. Like, I think this is when the higher-ups at Sega just had to put their hand on the shoulder of the dreamers there and be like, this is it. No more. Yeah. It's sad, it's unfortunate. And I think us as fans, we live in this kind of state where we think above and beyond what is actually the reality of the things. And I think this is where you and me as kind of voices of fandom get in trouble sometimes because, you'll look back at our videos and we'll be really excited and ecstatic about things, but in the end, we typically actually see eye to eye with Sega's decisions because we're like, yeah, that wouldn't have been smart to make a Dreamcast 2. Like on paper.
Even though I want it.
Even though I want
it so
it,
bad.
like, it would have been really dumb. But yeah, and I mean, just get this. So in 2000, Sega was asking staff what non-Sega platforms they would like to work on, and they were bringing up hardware like PDAs, WonderSwan, GBA. So they were kind of testing the waters with staff. At that point, Sega also had plans for a DC chip, as they call it, which would allow, as you mentioned, DVD players and set-top boxes to play Dreamcast games. I think there was even a reveal, actually on our site, wasn't it, that the Xbox was going to have it, or at least we had additional information. I don't think we've ever released that. We should release that. We never
released it. It's basically, is somebody emailed us a list of things that, like, I guess he worked at Xbox.
They were meeting notes.
They were meeting notes for Xbox Live before it came out, and they basically just went through what worked for Sega and what did not work for Sega and what they're going to take for
they
Xbox
spoke with Live. Sega. Yeah, this was they had a meeting with people from Sega to pick their brains about Xbox Live. We should. I'll dig through the emails. Maybe we can post that for our Patreon members or something, and then to the site later on. I don't know.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Sure.
We'll talk about it. But but none of this DC chip stuff happened. But fans did read about it in magazines. Even the official Dreamcast magazine staff were told that this is the future. This is what's going to be happening. And you can listen back to that episode. I believe it was episode 50 of the Swingin' Report show. And they were really confused. They were like, wait, what? Like, they just came to work one day and Sega's like, we make DVDs now. We make DVD players. And they're like, it's going to be on like air conditioners? Like, what is this? And it was weird. And I think this, like I was saying, I think there were people at the company just trying to do whatever they could to keep the Dreamcast alive. And this was probably one of those directions that higher-ups were like, you can see where it goes, but it's probably not going to happen. Work also began on ports for Sega arcade games on the PS2. I mean, clearly, those PS2 titles came out very quickly after July 30th, 2001, so it's clear they were doing work behind the scenes with, what was it, Acclaim?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think information even leaked that some of those games were coming out, and Sega had to backtrack and say, it's just some of the arcade games that you've already seen on the Dreamcast 3 years ago. Nothing to get excited about. No, I think at the time I remember reading about this. I'm like, wait, Crazy Taxi's on PS2? And this was like late 2000s, I think. And they're like, it's just going to be Crazy Taxi and like, simple arcade ports that you saw 2 years ago.
I remember reading the article in the official Dreamcast magazine where it basically said, is Sonic coming to PS2? And then it was like them saying, no, President, and it was that excuse you used.
And so I think that was kind of a leak that they didn't intend to happen. Because clearly, as it went on, Virtua Fighter 4 was there, and several other games went to PS2 that never saw a release on the Dreamcast. And like I'm saying, despite this, Sega denied rumors. Charles Belfield said at a November 2000 press conference that, well, the Dreamcast as it is, like this console with those controllers and the 56K modem, may not be shipping in 2 years' time. So in 2002, you might not be seeing this exact thing. The future of the Dreamcast was as a brand that would appear on other devices and be more of a service. So you would still have your Dreamcast console, but you might eventually replace it with your Dreamcast DVD player, and you would pay your SegaNet online fee, but it would now be a Sega Dreamcast service, and maybe you'd get downloadable games and things like that. Basically the precursor to Xbox Live and PSN, things like that, where there's a lot more to it. And even with, Game Pass, like Xbox Game Pass, that's on a variety of platforms. It's not just the Xbox, right?
That's true.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that. So again, Sega thinking ahead of the curve there. Do you think the Dreamcast chip would have been a success? I don't.
You know what? At the time, I was thinking, like, man, this is a genius idea. Because, like, okay, let's say you make this, like, I mean, hindsight, no. But I was like a kid back then, right? So I was a teenager. What do I know, right? But to me, it could have been a success if the Dreamcast never happened, and they basically sold this architecture like, look, we're Sega, man. We're a big name. So imagine your TV has a slot that could put in our games and just play them on your TV, like, or your DVD player or whatever.
Right.
And like, so that would have been epic because it would give them like a edge up, like, hey everybody, and then you would have like hundreds and millions of units that could play your games. Like, that makes sense. But in the end, it was like you already tainted the Dreamcast name technically by abandoning it. So
Dreamcast would have
Yeah, so it's kind of weird because now you're getting to the territory where you're changing it too much. 2 years ago, you were a console and you were going against Sony. Now you're a DVD / whatever thing.
Right, and basically the Dreamcast would have become a little logo on your DVD player as just a feature. Not unlike, back in the day you'd see CD-ROM compatible, photo CD compatible, all of these formats, and VCD, so Dreamcast just would have been like the game version of that, I guess. Maybe you kind of think of the App Store, how you can play games on your Apple TV, on your phone, on your iPad, on your computer. It's all the same account. And I think that would have been innovative, but I just don't think the technology was there at the time in the early 2000s. I think if this was something Sega was getting into maybe late 2000s, they probably would have really been innovative and going somewhere. But who knows, by that point they might have been sold off to Apple or something who just wanted to cannibalize them for their tech,
Yeah.
It's hard to say. Unfortunately, though, this plan was killed by Japan 3 weeks after Christmas. So in 2001, when they made that announcement. Several reasons were given for the demise. Sega's inability to match Microsoft and Sony's marketing budgets has been one. Big name publishers not being on board with the Dreamcast, like EA and Square. Sega of America claimed that they were unable to target customers outside of the core demographic, even though the Dreamcast sold more than Saturn, so that's kind of weird. Like, it did better, but they were like, it didn't do as good as we wanted.
They had some high expectations, huh?
Yeah. And at least from what I've read, it's more likely Sega simply did not counter their financial struggles from the Saturn with the Dreamcast, and they were also suffering from expensive projects like Shenmue. So it was just one of those things where... And I think that makes the most sense because, like I said, in 1999, they were already planning this 2001 announcement and shift to third party. And I think it was because they were just looking at the financials, and they're like, there's no way we're going to make it. And even I, in the past, I've worked for places where they will tell you to your face, things are looking great, we have many years ahead of us, but then, like, down the line, there's huge cuts and everything because really behind the scenes, they weren't doing well, but they didn't want to tell the lower employees, so they would just keep lying to you until the shit hit the fan. But to end it kind of on a positive note, April 2001, so this is after that announcement, Sega did attend Game Jam, and they kind of unofficially signed off the Dreamcast project with Yuji Naka, Yu Suzuki, and Noriyoshi Oba, who's from... What's he from?
Guy that didn't he make
Panzer
Crazy
Dragoon
Taxi?
in Crazy Taxi.
Right.
Yeah. So he took the stage with them to promote the final 36 games that were going to be releasing to the console throughout 2001. And I even remember as a console owner, I was still playing the Dreamcast well into 2002 because there were still a lot of great games coming out for it. So it wasn't the end. It was just kind of like, it was weird being told that the hardware you have is dying. I guess the closest comparison I can make is the Wii U, where they were just, but they didn't really tell you. They were just like, Switch,
Yeah.
So how was the final year of the Dreamcast for you as a fan, and what do you think the console's legacy is? And after that, I'd like to also, we could have our final thoughts and then share some of the comments from our Patreon supporters.
Okay, basically to me, It was kind of eye-opening, right? Like, you had a console. I was still investing in this console. I still thought it was great. I was still buying controllers. I was still playing online with people. I think I probably played the Dreamcast more during like 2002, 2003, and even 2004. I didn't even buy a PlayStation 2 until like 2005. That's how I felt about the console and its games.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it was still great. I mean, there's so much Dreamcast games. I still haven't played all the Dreamcast games. So to me, it's like it still kind of goes on, right? Like, sure, they're not making games, but they made so many great games during those 2 years that like there's a lot to explore there. And it took me years and years before I decided to move on from the Dreamcast. So they did something right.
Oh, absolutely. They released a ton of games. I know in the past, when I was bored, I think I did some math, and I just showed in the same amount of time that the N64 released their entire library, you know, like the Dreamcast had already surpassed it, you know, in 18 months. Like, it's insane. And the games, it wasn't like, it wasn't all garbage. Like, a lot of them were classics, great games, for a long time only available on that console. I think the legacy of the Dreamcast is probably, it was the last like pure gaming machine where the innovations were all tied back to gaming. I think after that we got into this kind of terrible time when game console makers were starting to treat their consoles like entertainment hubs. I remember watching E3s and people would be bemoaning Microsoft talking about streaming movies in your living room, and it's like, cool, but we're here for games, and I don't think Sega were ever all about that. I think the Dreamcast itself was just like, games came first, and we're seeing that again now. I think they're kind of coming around the Switch, and I think that's why people compare the Switch to the Dreamcast, because it's a very game-focused console, but the Switch would never touch the Dreamcast in terms of online gameplay and content. It's actually kind of laughable, because you think about the Switch does not have that many online games. I think the Dreamcast probably has more online games than the Switch. So,
I agree with that.
But you know, it was a great swan song. It's a fantastic console. I think if you don't own one, I would suggest picking it up. I know there's all these things called like Dream Pie and emulating and all that sort of stuff. But let's be honest, just go get the console. And, you know, like, burn some games if you want. I don't care. Like,
yeah,
you know, they're too expensive now. Burn some games. It's really not going to hurt the thing that badly. You know, get a backup, whatever.
Yeah, there's even this thing on the Saturn. I've seen it at least. I think they have one on the Dreamcast where you could load the ISOs on like a hard drive or a separate like flash drive or something, and then just play them off the list. Whatever it takes, I just suggest you play it off of real hardware, because I hate when I have to play sometimes like emulators and it's always just a little off. It just bugs me, you know? So that's just my opinion on that too.
Yeah, yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to add about the Dreamcast before we get into our patrons?
I love the Dreamcast. It's the reason why Sega Bits is probably created if it wasn't for that. So yeah, it's a great console. Happy 20th anniversary. I hope everybody plays it.
Yes.
And let's hear some other people's comments about the Dreamcast.
Absolutely. So if you are a Patreon supporter, you get first come, first serve, and as of now, only serve for hearing your thoughts read. Now, this one, I was shocked because I posted this yesterday, and we have 3 people, which doesn't seem like a lot, but they posted a ton. So I don't know, George, if you're editing this, maybe you can drop in like the full screen grabs and just kind of cycle through them so people can take a look at what they're saying here. I can't read all of this, or it would take another probably 15 minutes of the show, but I'll read some selections here. So here we go. So we have 019. He says his memories include getting my launch issue of the Dreamcast magazine after pre-ordering, bringing it to school and showing off all the games I was going to be playing, using my 56K modem to spend the days downloading videos of Sonic Adventure, and forcing my family to gather around and watch, getting the console and not affording a VMU yet, and replaying Sonic Adventure from the start over and over again, seeing how far I could get replaying, how far I could get without the VMU. He also says playing Blue Stinger and hearing "goddamn son of a bitch" in a video game very loudly, and having my dad yell into the room inquiring what the heck I was watching. Daniel Andres says the Dreamcast is my favorite console of all time. It has introduced me to so many great games. I've had one ever since 2013, and I have loved it immediately ever since. That's kind of cool. So he's a newbie, but it's his favorite console of all time. So good for him. He's played some great games here. He lists Sonic Adventure, Sonic Shuffle, Jet Set Radio, Skies of Arcadia, Seaman, both Shenmues. Tons of great games here he's listing off. So he's happy to have discovered it. We're happy that he's playing it. Thank you so much for your comments. And then we have Nicholas Schaefer here. He says, I remember my first time I saw the Dreamcast. It was holiday 99. I was 14. I had only received my first video game console, the Genesis, less than a year ago, and was obsessed with all things Sega. It was at Toys R Us, and they had a demo of Sonic Adventure. Someone had set it to Big the Cat, and I didn't know I was supposed to do with it, so I thought it was just cool. It took me a long time to save, and I was finally able to buy it in June 2001. Me and my buddies took turns playing Sonic Adventure, Tony Hawk, Crazy Taxi, and Sonic Shuffle for the next 48 hours, and he was surprised it didn't overheat. He probably spent the most time playing the Sonic Adventure 2 demo. Yeah, I don't blame him. I played that one a lot. Yeah. No matter how many times I play City Escape, I always want to play it one more time. And so, yeah, he looks like he really loves the Dreamcast, and I don't blame him. So I really like hearing these stories both from the 90s, 2000s, and even as late as 2013. It just goes to show you that it's a fantastic console that stands the test of time. So happy 20th birthday to the Sega Dreamcast. Again, it runs on magic. There's nothing inside of it except for dreams and love and good intentions. So go play your Dreamcast today.
See ya.
Bye.